The Analogue NT Mini Noir is clearly a legacy device from a company that has moved on to a new way of doing things. If you look at their new and future products like the Super NT, the Mega SG, the Pocket, the Duo, they have clearly moved on to more affordable devices to hook up to modern displays and get pristine audio and video from original cartridges. Whereas the Analogue NT Mini Noir is a $500 device made out of aluminum. It's made to look beautiful on your shelf when it's not even playing cartridges. It's a legacy way of doing things that Analogue is clearly moving away from. But in March 2020, they announced one final run of the Analogue NT Mini Noir. So the last time they were ever going to make an NT Mini, and with the Noir edition, they added a new cartridge slot, which was supposed to be much improved over the previous one, which people had problems with. It was supposed to come out in the summer. However, in the summer, it got delayed, and they actually, when they delayed it, announced, we're going to put in a more powerful FPGA, and it's going to have interpolation, which is a much requested feature. So it got delayed to November. I just got it about a week or two ago. I've been playing with it ever since. And today we're going to review it. But it's a funny thing to review because you can't buy one. And even if you could, should you? Because you can't get one for $500. You're more going to spend $700 on eBay at this point. And I'm sure over time that price is going to go up and up. So obviously, to review something, you have to talk about its features. And the features this thing has are incredible. So obviously, you can play Nintendo Entertainment System cartridges, Famicom cartridges, and it outputs through HDMI with 1080p. Along with that HDMI output, there are seemingly innumerable options for adjusting the size and aspect ratio of that display. You can even change the palettes that the NES displays. So if you're used to seeing the sky of Super Mario be exactly a certain shade of blue, you can load in a palette that allows that to happen. If you're used to it being kind of purplish, then you can make that happen as well. The interpolation feature is frankly stunning. One of the problems with displaying older games on modern displays is that the old games were formatted to show the pixels on screens that had kind of rectangular pixels. That's not the case on modern displays, so there's kind of this weird choice you have with a lot of them. Either you can display them one-to-one with square pixels, which makes the whole screen kind of look a little squished as to what you remember, or you can have it display at the aspect ratio that you remember, 4:3, but it creates this kind of shimmer effect when it's scrolling that's definitely not pleasing to the eye. Interpolation fixes that by just kind of blurring the edges just enough so that you can't see that they're blurred, but it also gets rid of all that shimmering, it's a really nice effect, and it's awesome that this thing has it. It also has a full set of analog outputs, so you can still hook it up to a CRT, you can hook it up to your old TV that you had when you were a kid, or if you can find a new Trinitron for cheap or a PVM, you can do it that way. So you really have a ton of output options with this thing. You can even load a custom firmware that allows you to play ROMs that you don't even have cartridges for, and they even allow you to play Genesis games and a bunch of other consoles on this thing. So what this thing offers are amazing. And there's no real competition for this thing feature to feature. There's no other device that does everything that the NT Mini Noir does at any price. There are competitors. Retro USB AVS is an obvious competitor. It can play cartridges. It uses an FPGA to hardware emulate the NES, just like the NT Mini Noir. But it only does HDMI. It doesn't have analog output, and it only outputs at 720p, not 1080p. The Mister, I think, is an obvious competitor, but it doesn't play cartridges. It outputs at 1080p, pristine audio and video, but it will only play ROMs, not cartridges. Hyperkin Retron 5 will play cartridges, outputs at 1080p, but it uses software emulation, which introduces lag and some other problems. So there is no other device that feature to feature matches this thing, but you are paying an absolute premium for this. I feel like this is actually kind of a luxury device. It reminds me of a comparison in the car world between a Honda and a Mercedes. Both of those vehicles will get you from point A to point B, but one of them is, 3 times the cost of the other. The Mercedes is 3 times the cost of a Honda because it'll do it nicer. You're more comfortable in the seat. There's more soundproofing, so you don't hear the road noise. The stereo is nicer. The engine is more powerful. It just provides a nicer experience, which you have to pay for. And I think that is kind of what this device is designed to do. It's a nicer experience that you have to pay for. But that's also where it falls down. Functionally, what it does best in class. It provides amazing visuals. I've never seen my NES cartridges look as good as this thing makes them look. Like, it's absolutely stunning, to be honest with you. However, it's when you start to get to the periphery, the niceties where it falls down. The biggest problem with this device is the newly redesigned cartridge slot. It simply does not hold the cartridge in tight enough. It flops around like a dick in the wind. When you put the cartridge into the slot, you can feel it. Like, first thing you do when you get this thing is put a cartridge into the slot, and you feel how loose it is. You can push it forward, you can push it back, and you realize it's not making a very good connection. You can feel it. And that's one of the reasons people want this device. If you didn't care about putting a cartridge into a slot, then you might as well buy a Mister or emulate on your computer. Like, that's part of the experience. It's part of the satisfaction. It's one of the reasons I believe record players have had a resurgence in popularity. People like the act of putting the record on the record player and getting up to flip it over, in the mindset of, I am now going to sit here and listen to a record, not 100 different artists, but a record. I'm now performing a physical motion to enable this act. That's a similar feeling to what you want to get when you plug a cartridge into a console. The options are out there to have every game from a console on a memory card. You never have to get up to swap out a cartridge, but there is some satisfaction doing it. There is some deliberateness to actually putting a cartridge into a console. And this fucks that up on a fundamental level, and it's one of the strongest aspects of the device, right? If you can buy a Mister that does everything this does, but it doesn't have the cartridge slot, why would you get this? Because it looks pretty, because it has the cartridge slot, and you want to play your original cartridges, and you want that satisfaction of putting it in a cartridge slot, and this fucks it up so tremendously. I hope they figure out a way to fix this, whether it be an insert that you can put in there to hold the cartridge more securely. There are these kind of like dust flaps that you push out of the way when you insert the cartridge. I wonder if adding heavier duty springs to those flaps would kind of hold the cartridge in place better, but it really does screw it up on a fundamental level. The other thing, and you may have noticed this in this video already, the NT Mini Noir comes with a controller. It's the 8-bit do N30 2.4G, and it's a wonderful controller. You can see it really looks like an original NES controller. It's wireless, and it has two extra buttons above the A and B buttons that are just turbo buttons, which is really convenient. It's low latency. It's just a wonderful controller, but it has a transceiver that you plug into the controller port of the Analogue NT Mini, and the NT Mini keeps it powered on all the time because you can actually power up the device by hitting select and A at the same time on the controller, which is a really nice feature. But it fucking blinks all the goddamn time. When the console is turned off, it powers up that transceiver, and that transceiver seems to be searching for this controller 24 hours a day. Maybe you're not playing your NES games. Maybe you're watching a movie and you have this in your center console, and that fucking thing is just going to blink at you all goddamn night. Obviously, a piece of tape can cover that up. You're never going to see it again. Hopefully, they even can update either the controller or the NT Mini Noir to take care of that blinking. And I know it's a small thing, but when you're buying the Mercedes, you expect these things to have been thought through. When you're buying the Honda, you expect that the e-brake, you got to wiggle a little bit to get it to release. You expect that you got to pull a little harder on the hood release to get it to open. On the Mercedes, you want to push a button to do your e-brake. You don't even want to think about opening the hood. That's for some dude at the shop to do. This is just a weird thing that somebody should have thought about, and clearly they haven't. Another odd thing about it, again, another nitpick about it, is there's a power button on the back of the unit. Now, obviously, we're talking about 35-year-old cartridges. So you are going to be plugging these things in and unplugging them constantly because, they've gotten dirty over the last 35 years. They've corroded over the last 35 years. And the cartridge slot is not good enough that it makes a solid connection 100% of the time every time you plug in, even a clean cartridge. Because the way it flops around in there is like, you don't even know if it's making a good connection. Sometimes all you got to do is touch it, and all of a sudden it's making a good connection. You just like back away from the thing slowly and hope not to fuck it up. Anyhow, back to the power button. Because the cartridge slot sucks, you're constantly going to be turning it off, turning it back on, so you can take the cartridge out, put it back in. Why would you put that on the back? Why wouldn't you put that on the front of the unit? Why wouldn't you put it on the top where it is on the Super NT or the Mega SG? Again, this feels like a legacy device. It feels like Analogue was trying to make something like premium, that form took a little bit of precedence over function in a few different ways. And, that's what they came up with. Something that was beautiful, something made out of aluminum, something that looked premium under, your big 77-inch display in your living room. You didn't have to be embarrassed about having a Nintendo in your living room because this one was beautiful. They've clearly moved on from here. They've clearly moved on to, the way they're doing it with the Super NT and the Mega SG. That is the path forward. So I don't want to be too hard on Analogue because they've already seen the error of their ways. I don't know if they're ever going to make a console out of aluminum again, but I hope they never make a console with such a shitty cartridge slot because that really wrecks the experience of the console in a fundamental way. So that's my review of the Analogue NT Mini, which doesn't matter because you can't get one anyway.